Are you not entertained?
Yes, sir! We'll have a real good time!
He's Dave, and I'm Dallas, and this is Vintertainment. We have opinions on just about everything. Sometimes those opinions are spot on. Sometimes they go down easier with a glass of wine. This is Vintertainment, the wine and entertainment pairing podcast.
Welcome back to another wine and entertainment pairing for your Vintertainment. This is, of course, the podcast where we delude ourselves into thinking you want to hear what we have to say about different pieces of pop culture and art, but know for a fact that you need to hear what we have to say about wine because, man, wine is complicated. You think all you need to know is the name of a grape, but even more important is where was it grown? And even then, you still can't depend on any given flavor profile without knowing what kind of container was it aged in. Was there skin contact or no skin contact? Cold or warm fermentation? Whole cluster or destemmed? What's the alcohol level? How long has it been in the bottle? Oh, okay, you don't actually need to know half of that, but you do definitely need to know the other half of that to know what you're getting in any given bottle. So what better way to get to know more about wine and about more wines than to hear one WSET Level 3 certified wine professional and one normal person who puts up with him natter on about specific wine details, flavor profiles, and the stories behind them, all couched in terms of how well they may or may not go with certain kinds of entertainment.
And what better way to learn about the art of entertaining, storytelling, and world building than to listen to a professional writer, world builder, and one normal person who puts up with him natter on about mood, theme, artistic intention, and poetic notion, all couched in terms of how well they may or may not pair with specific wines.
Because whether you're talking about wine or entertainment, you get the most out of either. When you have an adventurous spirit and an open mind, explore different corners of what an art form has to offer. Wine itself is an art form. It's history and culture in a glass, and in most cases, a winemaker's passion, just as entertainment is history, culture, and an artist's passion on a page, screen, or record, which is why they go so goddamn well together.
That's right.
Now, please be sure to give this podcast a follow or subscribe, and even better, leave a rating and or review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or whatever platform you're listening to this on. Both a rating and a review, if you can be bothered with it. The more you do, the more the algorithm loves us, shows us to others who also listen to wine or entertainment podcasts, and that's how we grow. Also, please tell a friend or family member about this podcast if you think they'd enjoy it. Send them to our podcast, to our Instagram, Vintertainment Pod, Vintertainment Pod on the IG, and or to our home base of operations, which is Substack. And you can find that at vintertainmentstudios.com, our glorified vanity URL that will nevertheless take you to a Substack. And there you will find a directory of all our episodes, directories of all the wine and entertainment pairings broken down by category, bonus pairings not featured on this podcast, articles about the wine and entertainment industries, including an article on Dracula 1992, directed by Francis Ford Coppola. We covered that actually, parts of it in part one of this episode that you are listening to today, as we chronicled all of Coppola's winery empire, where it came from, when he directed The Godfather, how he got the cash, how he almost lost it, how Dracula rescued it, and then how we got all the way to where we are today, where he sold a major portion of it to finance what we're going to talk about today, Megalopolis. So make sure to check that out over on our Substack. You will also find guest collabs with other wine and entertainment writers, interactive polls. I mean, I'm telling you, folks, if you enjoy this podcast whatsoever, you simply must go follow us on Substack at vintertainmentstudios.com. It is the best place to get to know us better. And today, part two of our epic chronicling of The Godfather and Megalopolis. This is where, in part one, we talked a little bit about the wines that we are going to be pairing with these two. We got our hands on some very old Niebaum-Coppola wines. So it was good stuff, his high-end wines, that first winery that he ever bought with the cash from The Godfather Part 1. And we found a 2000 Cabernet Franc and a 1998 quote-unquote Cask Cabernet Sauvignon. We opened them up together. at a local LA place called Curated Wine Shop. Shout out to Curated Wine Shop
Hey, guys.
here in LA. Now, Curated Wine Shop is owned by an ex-production designer here in the industry. So we brought them there to share, because old wines, when you open them, they're really probably not going to last after day one. When you open them, they're going to oxidize much faster than younger wine will. They won't hold up for long. So I kind of we shouldn't each drink a full bottle of wine in one sitting. So let's bring more people into the mix so we can actually drink all of this once we open it. And there, of course, was also a little bit of a risk they wouldn't even be good at that point anymore. But let's take the risk and let's share it with others. Sharing wine is also a big part of what makes it so great. So we brought it there, we opened it, and it just so happened a fellow production designer was sitting at a nearby table. The production designer of Megalopolis was sitting at a nearby table. So we called him on over and he sat down and chatted with us. We whipped out our phones. He allowed us to take a little impromptu recording of his experiences with Megalopolis. He got to try the wines and decide which might pair with which. So we have some snippets. This is Bradley Rubin that we're going to be talking to today, or who we talked to a couple of days ago.
We're going to hear today.
Right. And you're going to hear today because we recorded some of those clips. Now, note when we play those clips, there's going to be background noise. This was there was music playing in the background.
It's guerrilla audio.
Going on, guerrilla audio. But we did our best to clean it up a little bit and to make sure Bradley could be heard. He actually has a very soft speaking voice, which made it a little difficult. He's very soft spoken, and me and Dallas are not. And so we have very booming voices, podcast voices. And of course, we were holding our phones. Our voice was right up against the phone and his was like across the table. So I was like, ooh, yeah, bad setup. Next time we got to put the phone in the middle of the table. Whoopsie. But we're going to do our best with all of that. And you're going to hear from Bradley here today. Also, one of the ladies who works at Curated knew an actress who worked in Megalopolis. And so we're going to, she offered to put us in touch. She reached out to her. We will be interviewing her next week. So part 3 will drop next week as well. And that will be a bit of it's not going to be part 3. It's going to be a companion interview with her about her experiences getting cast in Megalopolis, what it was like filming. And I can guarantee you this, whoever you think this actress is, it's not. It's going to be a special little interview. We are going to be, and I even know that we have a special kind of exclusive interview with her, because when we set up the time and date to record, she basically is like, and by the way, I've never done this before. So she's never done an interview on a podcast before. So I'm like, okay, here we go. So this is going to be fun. But for today, we are here to talk about Megalopolis. Dallas, why don't you give us a little bit of history, a little bit of background on Megalopolis to get us started.
Let's do a quick flyover. I like to call these little flyovers of Megalopolis here. So Megalopolis is a multi-decades long work, 40 years, if not 50, depending on some of the data out there, set in a near future New York City and centers around the work and obsessions of a visionary architect and his efforts to build a new utopia from the ashes of a failed capitalist civilization while encountering the friction of deeply unyielding politicos. And if you're paying attention to politics right now, we are definitely dealing with deeply unyielding politicos. In the 70s, Coppola envisioned an operatic epic of a future city. At the center of that idea, like the center of some of his other ideas, was the concept of imperialism. Again, if you're paying attention to the news today, the concept of imperialism may ring true. After the success of Apocalypse
Although at the time he was thinking more like the Vietnam War, like that was because he was doing Apocalypse Now and things like that. So yeah.
As a matter of fact, after the success of Apocalypse Now, he was emboldened to begin fleshing out this operatic opus. Then in the 1980s, still connected to all things Italy, he came across the mention of the Catalanarian conspiracy and ancient coup that would become a theme of his work. And like any good idea hoarder, Do
you know what that conspiracy is?
Yes, I do. I have another note here.
I've never heard of it.
Yeah, we'll circle back at the end because it actually is important to the tale of Megalopolis. So later on, we'll circle back
Okay.
to it.
Okay.
And like any good idea hoarder, he stacked away thousands of bits of ideas, ribbons of incomplete scenes, notions, and themes into folders, which would eventually form the script. But as mentioned earlier, the bankruptcy associated with the 80s films, like One from the Heart, left little room in the coffers for Megalopolis. And if you listen to our earlier episode, the previous episode, you will know very clearly why there was very little money in the coffers. So go back and check that episode out. Eventually,
and One from the Heart, he put a lot of his own money
a
into
lot
it.
of his own.
That was one of the problems. It was the first one.
It was the first one, as a matter of
he
fact.
self-financed, essentially,
You know, which, you know, apparently he didn't learn that lesson. So, hey,
this time,
right? Eventually, in the 90s, after a few of the aforementioned successes, he began to hold table reads of early drafts of the Megalopolis screenplay, featuring familiar names from his body of work like De Niro, DiCaprio, Gandolfini, Baldwin, Crowe, among others. Then 9/11 happens and brings everything to a halt. It finally ramps up speed again around 2003 and held workshops with the likes of Ryan Gosling, even going so far as to ask composers to create symphonies for the work, which up until that point did not actually exist. Then knee-deep in the auteur's nightmare, as it is called, which is basically having a long-range project that grows 1,000 arms and takes more time than you care to devote to it. It becomes its own monster. That is the auteur's nightmare. He decided to take a break from the Megalopolis pre-production and make a novella adaptation called Youth Without Youth. You can find that. I think the entire thing is on YouTube at the moment, I believe.
And is that Youth Without Youth? It was a film adaptation of a novella?
Yes, it was a film adaptation of the novella.
Okay. I wasn't sure if you meant he wrote a novella.
Oh, no.
Was an adaptation of Megalopolis.
The story is a friend gave him a copy of the novella and, essentially said, check this out. And he was inspired and went ahead and made did a film adaptation of Youth Without Youth. So definitely check it out. It's a fun little piece. Then finally, in 2019, he announces that he had completed the screenplay for Magalopolis and will, self-finance the project. Luckily,
the crazy thing about that he announced that in 2019 is the sale for his winery wasn't until 2021.
Yes.
Right.
Now, I believe
he was like, how am I going to do this?
Right.
Was step 2, right?
I believe that the conversations, as far as I can find, the conversation of the sale had already started. And the film premiered at Cannes on May 16th and hit theaters September 27th, 2024, with opening global gross of $14 million on 130 some odd million.
Of
mostly self-financed. This is just making every cell in my body cringe. These numbers, I'm definitely the person who would self-finance for sure, 100%.
Can I just say, like, in this movie, there are a lot of these little cement blocks in sort of Roman or Germanic language that like are title cards that pop up. And the very first one that does in the movie is a title card that says debt. Some large families were completely destitute. Like, that's how the movie starts. I'm like, wow. I'm like, yes. I'm like, okay, you were living the dream, man, but also writing about what you were doing to yourself in that moment. But yeah, if you listen to part 1, where we really chronicle Coppola's career and how almost or bankrupt he did go, how he had to completely declare bankruptcy for his first production company, Zoetrope, rebrand as American Zoetrope much later. This is not new to him. This is what he does.
This is his thing. This is part of the process.
Yeah. So Coppola has a quote: "My greatest fear is to make a really shitty, embarrassing, pompous film of an important subject, and I am doing it. I will tell you right straight from the most sincere depths of my heart, the film will not be good. Now that film he was talking about was Apocalypse Now. And it was good. And that brings us to Megalopolis.
Yeah,
No, basically it does.
It
So
kind of does.
cast members, talking about Megalopolis, cast members including Adam Driver have spoken positively of their experience on the film, but according to other sources, its making was almost as fraught and chaotic as that of Apocalypse Now.
Yeah.
Much time and effort was allegedly wasted. Crucial crew members quit halfway through, and Coppola made things even worse and more complicated by embarking on a property redevelopment at the same time. As one crew member put it, quote, "It was like watching a train wreck unfold day after day, week after week, and knowing that everybody there had tried their hardest to help the train wreck be avoided," unquote. Now, can I just say, we had a quote like, this is very similar to the experience Coppola had on The Godfather, his very first major film, when he was in the bathroom and those crew members came in and they're like, this is a shit show,
Yeah.
this is a train wreck. It's all going wrong. So that's just to sort of restate that Coppola is used to people thinking this and saying this, and everything, all evidence to the contrary, or all evidence showing that, yes, it is a problem. It is all going wrong, and a masterpiece coming out the other end. I mean, Apocalypse Now, even more than The Godfather, but this is something he's very used to. Now, to be fair, by the time he was filming Megalopolis, he was also used to the opposite.
Oh, God, yeah.
One from the Heart. The Cotton Club.
He's had all the experiences.
Yes, he's had all the experience. He's had these things go wrong. We were talking in part one that he doesn't have a great ratio of hits to misses.
Yeah.
Like this version of what he does to make genius work seems to not work as more often than it does, and yet he stuck to it his whole career. So. Coppola has described Megalopolis as his quote-unquote dream script. He first had the idea while making Apocalypse Now, fueled by the same concerns about U.S. imperialism. He has framed it as a, quote, Roman epic set in modern America, transposing your conspiracy to overthrow the rulers of the Roman Republic, there it is, to overthrow the rulers of the Roman Republic in 63 BC to a sci-fi future.
Yep.
We'll get to that. The plot hinges on an idealistic architect, played by Driver, trying to build a utopian city on the ruins of New York against the wishes of the mayor, played by Giancarlo Esposito, with the mayor's socialite daughter, played by Nathalie Emmanuel, caught in the middle. The cast is star-studded: Shia LaBeouf, Aubrey Plaza, Dustin Hoffman, Jon Voight. Who can I just say? Jon Voight. I do not want to give this motherfucker credit because of who he is.
Same.
But
Same.
he is the best performance in this movie.
He's perfect.
He's
perfect in the role, actually.
Somehow.
Yeah.
And he's delivering. I don't know if it's because, he's relegated himself to the far crazy right-wing propaganda pieces these days where no one else will touch him.
The elder statesman James Woods.
Yes, but I don't know if it's because he knew this was his shot at being relevant again for one more movie, but he is giving it his all.
He's turning it in, man. He is turning it in.
And he is reminding everyone why he was such an amazing actor in the first place, regardless of what a scummy human being he became in his later years. Or maybe he was always scummy. That I don't know.
Right.
But he's always been a very good actor. And wow, every line he delivers in this movie is fucking pitch perfection. And both serious and hysterical and satirical. And he has all the best lines in this movie. He delivers them impeccably with comedic timing that I'm just like, what is going on? How is he this good?
Yeah.
It's incredible. I hate giving him this credit, but my God, he's good in this movie.
He is.
So the project first came into the front burner after the failure of Coppola's 1982 musical One from the Heart, which, as we've already mentioned, he self-financed. And he opted in that one to direct it remotely from a custom-built trailer known as the Silverfish. He did this on Megalopolis as well, so remember that. He did this in order to test out new video production technology. As one industry figure put it, he took an $8 million project and used the latest advances in video to bring it in for $23 million.
Yeah.
So In the early 80s, he talked about it a lot, says the sound designer and longtime Coppola collaborator Richard Beggs, and he was already thinking big. At one point, it was going to be staged, sort of like Wagner's Ring Cycle. The film was going to be screened over 4 nights. Okay. The audiences would come and they would book themselves into a hotel and see this thing in a gigantic outdoor purpose-built theater.
Yes, sign me up. I want this experience, damn it. Yes.
He was thinking of something like the Red Rocks Amphitheater in Colorado.
Love that venue, by the way.
Okay. Now, there was a tiny bit of this in the theatrical performances or some of the theatrical screenings for Megalopolis where there would be an interactive element in the screenings. Dallas, you saw this in the theater. Was there any interactive element when you saw it in the theater?
Not other than I think there's a point when one of the characters looks directly at the screen and talks to the audience, but other than that, no. Okay, someone's supposed to come out with a microphone and do this thing where it's like you're talking to the audience, but then it's taking like audience feedback. Yeah.
Type of a thing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Oh, did that happen?
No, it was supposed to, but it didn't.
Oh, it was supposed to, but it didn't. Yeah. Okay. Well, they tried this. I don't think it was particularly successful. I don't think anyone particularly responded to it, so a lot of places just stopped or didn't do it. I'm not sure on this. Anyway, various personnel came and went over the years. In 1989, production was rumored to be starting at Rome's Cinecittà Studios, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, with Coppola's trusted production designer, Dean Tavoularis, and the comic book artist, Jim Steranko, who had worked with Coppola on Dracula, designing sets. Coppola regularly held table readings of the latest draft of the script with actors including Paul Newman, Robert De Niro, Al Pacino, James Caan, Edie Falco, and Uma Thurman. The cinematographer, Ron Frick, whose documentary, if I can pronounce this, Koyaanisqatsi? Koyaanisqatsi? Yeah. So Coppola produced that. Everyone knows the one I'm talking about, right? No one knows how to pronounce it exactly, but everyone knows what I'm talking about.
That's right.
Reportedly shot more than 30 hours of second unit footage around New York for the film. They were in the city shooting when 9/11 happened, which, says Coppola, prompted a major rethink. Quote, how do you make a movie about the center of the world without dealing with the fact that it was attacked and thousands of people were killed?
That's right.
Now, yes, there is something in the movie that is plainly referencing 9/11.
Yeah.
Well, okay, we'll get to it. About 300 rewrites, 40 years of preparation, and 1 winery sale later, he finally had the means to make his dream script come true. In autumn 2022, shooting commenced over several sound stages at Atlanta's Trilith Studios. I have no idea where Francis gets his energy from, says the British director Mike Figgis, who has known Coppola for 30 years. About 18 months ago, Figgis jokingly suggested making a fly-in-the-wall documentary of the making of Megalopolis. A few months later, Coppola contacted him out of the blue, saying, when can you be here? Can you come over now? That's according to Figgis, that is very Coppola. Yeah. Arriving in Atlanta, Figgis was impressed. So I want to see this documentary. Apparently, Figgis did film this.
This would be episode 4, by the way. Go on.
This is the Hearts of Darkness for this, documentary for this movie. Figgis says, watching an 84-year-old guy hold together this massive team and to have enough brains to be able to direct the actors, the camera, and everything, he was up every morning making notes on his way to the set, or he's discussing his idea with Roman, his son. And by the way, Roman Coppola gets an almost kind of co-director credit on this movie. It's sort of an acknowledgement that he was very, very instrumental in that.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, he's also the producer, so he's thinking about his interest rate, unquote. And if that wasn't enough, Coppola made life even harder for himself. When he arrived in Atlanta, he was looking for accommodation for his extended family, and he wasn't finding anything in particular that he liked. So he bought a drive-in motel, which had just closed, and decided to renovate it while filming. So,
because of course,
all the while, of course.
So
all through the shoot, he lived there. The construction noise started at 6 a.m. When Figgis, who opted to stay in a different hotel, asked Coppola how he handled it all, Coppola just said, look, it's all the same thing. Movie business, construction business. It's telling people what you want and making sure they do it. That is Coppola in a nutshell right there. Let me tell you, motherfucker. So, and this goes back to what we said in part 1 of The Godfather, where he had to stay in this motel with a very pregnant wife and all his screaming kids, and he couldn't sleep. And at the time, he hated it. And now he seeks it out. Now he literally invents the issue to occur so he can live in that chaos.
He needs some tension, some chaos, some irritation.
Yes, or something. I don't get it. So by the sound of things, the Megalopolis shoot became a clash between Coppola's old school approach, privileging spontaneity.
Naity. It's hilarious, though.
Naity. Privileging spontaneity and finding magic in the moment, and never digital filmmaking methods. Oh, and newer. Okay, I'm talking about...
Well, I
mean... Seriously. Should have stuck with Dracula style, right?
Exactly.
Build the city. Build a whole city, Francis.
Here's what's crazy. That's my major gripe with the film. If he had made this as practically as possible, I think it would have been a better film. But go on.
By the sound of things, the shoot became a clash between Coppola's old school approach, privileging spontaneity and finding the magic in the moment, and newer digital filmmaking methods, such as filming actors in front of virtual CGI landscapes in a quote-unquote volume, effectively a giant wall of LED screens. Today's technology enables directors to realize anything they can dream up, including utopian cities of the future, but working this way demands preparation and collaboration. So, quote, I think Coppola still lives in this world where, as an auteur, you're the only one who knows what's happening, and everybody else is just there to do what he asked them to do, suggested one former crew member who did not wish to be named.
Love that.
So... the crew member sometimes found Coppola's approach exasperating. Another quote, we had these beautiful designs that kept evolving, but he would never settle on one. And every time we would have a new meeting, it was a different idea. When the crew member insisted they needed to do more work to determine how the film was going to look, they say, Coppola replied, quote, how can you figure out what Megalopolis looks like when I don't even know what Megalopolis looks like?
I love that.
Unquote.
So good.
So, we mentioned this when we talked to Bradley, the second production designer on the film, who had to come in halfway through the shoot and pick up where the previous production design team left off. Anyway, a lot of time was apparently wasted. A second crew member recalls, quote, he would often show up in the mornings before these big sequences, and because no plan had been put in place, and because he wouldn't allow his collaborators to put a plan in place, he would often just sit in his trailer for hours on end. Like a fucking actor. I swear to God. He wouldn't talk to anybody, was often smoking marijuana, and hours would go by without anything being filmed. And the crew and the cast would all stand around and wait. And then he'd come out and whip something up that just didn't make any sense.
Damn right.
And that didn't... Dallas is like proud auteur artist over there. And then... and didn't follow anything anybody had spoken about or anything that was on the page, and we'd all just go along with it, trying to make the best out of it. But pretty much every day, we just walk through shaking our heads, wondering what we just spent the last 12 hours doing. And as a third member crew member puts it, quote, this sounds crazy to say, but there were times when we were all standing around going, has this guy ever made a movie before?
Hilarious.
Unquote. So... Adam Driver's first day on set was particularly memorable. A source suggests one aspect of the story involves Driver's character's body fusing with some of the futuristic organic material called megalon. So rather than just using digital effects, Coppola wanted to achieve this effect through old school methods, using projectors and mirrors, which, as he had done on Dracula 30 years earlier. That's great, said one crew member, except nobody can move. So they basically strapped Adam Driver into a chair for 6 hours, and they literally took a $100 projector and projected an image on the side of his head. I'm all in for experimentation, but this is really what you want to do with the first day with a $10 million actor?
Yes. The shut up and do your job.
The effect would have been quick and easy to create digitally, they say, so Coppola spends literally half the day on what could have been done in 10 minutes. Quote, we were all aware that we were participating in what might be a really sad finish to his career. But he was just so unpleasant towards a lot of the people who were trying to help facilitate the process and help him make the movie better. Now, things came to a head in December 2022, roughly halfway through the 16-week shoot, when most of the visual effects and art teams were either fired or quit.
Yeah.
Who saw that coming? I think he had to work quite hard to then figure out how to replace them. I think this is Mike Figgis, the director and friend who was doing the behind the scenes documentary, says, I think he just wanted to liberate himself while he was shooting, so he didn't have to wait for stuff. And then he'd say, oh, I'll fix it later. I'll fix it in post, which I guess he's done before.
Yeah.
Now, the virtual volume, the LED screens, was abandoned in favor of more traditional green screen technology, according to one source. His dig at us was always, I don't want to make a Marvel movie. But at the end of the day, that's what he ended up shooting. Now, during the time he was shooting Megalopolis, Coppola was also contending with the fact that his wife, Eleanor, had become ill. And this is the lady who shot the Hearts of Darkness documentary, basically doing what Mike Figgis is doing for this Megalopolis movie. And she's been ride or die with him their whole lives. Every time he's almost gone bankrupt. I mean, they asked her, what do you think about this? And she was always like, we'll figure it out. We'll be fine. Like, she just never said bupkis. She was ride or die with Coppola.
Unwavering.
And I do wonder, she became ill. She was on set and location during the making of the film until her illness prevented her from being there. And she did pass away in April of 2024, shortly before the film's release. And I don't know how much of her illness did not either was part of why he had to dive into, like, I don't know if she was actually ill before they started shooting. And I don't know, like, if this was something they might have been able to see coming. And I don't know if her illness was something that had mortality on Coppola's mind. And so he's like, do or die, make this fucking movie, because none of us are here forever.
No.
I don't know if it was a little bit of an escape to, like, think about something else that wasn't his ill wife. I don't know, but it does make me wonder because of her illness and the timing of it. And if I do think Coppola makes movies and does things like this craft in the same way that he creates this chaos around him to survive anything this.
Got it.
Where it's like, he is not a sit in silence contemplating in the stillness. You know, he renovated a fucking drive-in motel to stay in while he did this. Now, that said, he had his little trailer, right? Which he also kind of hid out in. But so I guess it's a little bit of both, but it does make me wonder in any event.
Early reactions to by the way, real quick, according to Wikipedia at least, Eleanor was diagnosed with thymoma in 2010. While her doctor told her they could remove it by shrinking it with 3 months of chemo, she declined the treatment. So it seems as if it was connected to that, her death.
Just grew from there. Yeah. Okay. I mean, 14 more years, even after noticing it, that's not bad. But I wonder how rough, because as it grows, of course, different, you know, your body notices it more and more, and things start to go wrong. In any event, early reactions to Megalopolis have, of course, been mixed. Late reactions to Megalopolis has, of course, been mixed. There was, after a private screening in Los Angeles, one executive described it as, quote unquote, batshit crazy. Another told reporters, quote, there is just no way to position this movie. A third said, quote, it's so not good, and it was so sad watching it. This is not how Coppola should end his directing career. Now, others have almost oversold the damn thing, saying the opposite. One said, quote, I feel I was part of history. Megalopolis is a brilliant, visionary masterpiece. Another said, quote, I was so overwhelmed that I couldn't do anything for the rest of the day. Another one said, quote, this film is like Einstein and relativity in 1905, Picasso and Guernica in 1937. It's a date in the history of cinema. Whew.
I mean, yeah, I agree with that. Absolutely.
Now, in a 2010 interview, Francis Ford Coppola did say, quote, I don't think things through. I feel them through. And I know that half the time it might not land right. And maybe there's a pleasure in that. But in my life, I have to say that served me well.
Yeah.
When you're this old guy dying, you don't want to say, I wish I had done that and that.
When you're this...
In my case, I did it. Yeah.
When this old guy
I did
dying.
all the
wow, sorry. I'm sorry. Hold on 1 second. Read that line again. With this old guy dying.
When you are this old guy dying.
Great line. Great fucking line.
Yeah.
Okay.
And when you are that old guy dying, you don't want to say, I wish I had done this and that. In my case, I did it. I did all the things other people would just regret, and they didn't try.
Mhm.
Because in the end, you die. You don't get any award for just being conservative.
Damn right, Francis. Ah. Yeah.
So that said, let's talk about this goddamn movie.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Dallas, you saw it before me. You saw it in the theater. What were your initial thoughts?
Okay, so as I said, I'm one of those guys who, if it's an artist or an auteur that I sign up for, because he is one of those guys. It's like, look, whatever you give me, I'm going to be thankful for it. Thankful for it. I am. I may not like it in terms of the narrative or its structure or something, but I'm going to enjoy whatever the vision is, whatever feeling or emotion you put on the screen. And so going in, I didn't have high hopes. I didn't have expectations even. I didn't go in thinking, oh, this is going to be great. This is going to be good. I went in thinking, okay, this is going to be Coppola, whatever the fuck that means. And and it is such an expansive epic. It is sort of a life-affirming work from this artist, this auteur, because he is essentially affirming himself. He's affirming his POV. He's affirming his talent, his skill, his emotion, his creativity. And it does sort of stand as a punctuation to an epic career and an epic life. And like we said in the quotes, he doesn't necessarily think things out. He feels them out. And I'm a person who thinks everything out. Feeling is just not there for me in my writing. And because of that, I appreciate people who are purist in
The
that
flip
way.
side.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I appreciate that
Yeah.
purity. So going in, like I said, I had no expectations other than give it to me, daddy. Like whatever it is, give it to me.
I mean,
We're here.
same in terms of expectations.
Yeah.
And I was like, I mean, obviously I knew it had bombed. I knew people were very, the best most people had with this movie is, like you, they were appreciative that it existed. But I don't think anyone particularly thought it was well made. And so I'm like, and I mean, it production value, it's a $130 million movie. Production value wise, more outside of a few shoddy visual effects compared to other visual effects, like some of them are really good. And some of them, the visual effects, like one of my favorite moments of the movie, and I thought the effects were so elegantly, perfectly done. When they're going through the city and the statues are sagging.
Yes.
And
Beautiful.
like falling down and leaning on things. And they're all statues that represent things like justice and law and mercy. And like those Roman Greek statues of those gods that all represent those things. So
It's
like
the iconography
of scales
of empire. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And it was just a visual metaphor for like in a corrupt society, in a dissolving society, in a culture that is an empire that is dying. Like, here's how it dies: is these are the elements that are no longer strong enough and being held up well enough, and so they're lying down to die. They're lying down to sleep, or just like barely able to stand on their own. And I'm like, and even just the way it looked, I was like, yeah, I mean, this doesn't look like they spent $300 million on it or anything like that, but it's like, it works. It works exactly the way it should. And I'm like, God, this is right. This is exactly what this movie needs to be. Now, when I watched this movie though, I heard a lot of people say like there isn't really a story there, and I disagree with that. There is 100% a story here. It's telling a very specific story. The characters, there's a plot, all those fun things. Like it's not even hard to follow the plot.
No, it isn't.
Just doesn't work. And there's a difference where the one thing that I feel is I also appreciate someone who feels things through rather than thinks things through. I do want to point out, though, going back to a Bob Evans quote about The Godfather, where he told Francis not to be so goddamn cerebral. And it's interesting that then Francis, at this point in time, maybe even back then, now thinks that he doesn't think things through. He feels things through. And I wonder if that changed at any point, or if that is always his version of being cerebral, was feeling things through, versus what, really, maybe he didn't ultra intellectualize things.
Right.
He just would always be poetic
There's
about
an instinct,
them.
a poetic instinct. Part. Yeah. And I'm
not sure which, but it was interesting that he had this quote now, whereas other people called him super cerebral back then.
Right.
When it comes to feeling things through, obviously it has served him well sometimes. It worked really well in Dracula, where so much of, I think, doing a horror fantasy that was very heavily inspired by German Expressionism, I think there's a lot to feel through in that works really well. Apocalypse Now, same thing.
Yeah.
You took this incredibly, frankly, boring as shit novel and found that it was about a very serious topic, and just gave it cinematic reality through vibes. I mean, going back to our vibes line that we like to, so much about that movie is just vibes. It's contemplating these things, but not actually going anywhere with them. It just contemplates them.
I think...
And
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to tie that back. So in Megalopolis, I think it served him well in some movies. The problem with Megalopolis is it has a thesis. It's trying to prove this is how we create utopia. It's literally trying to say how we create utopia.
Yeah.
And Heart of Darkness doesn't have a conclusion. Heart of Darkness doesn't have an end point. This is how you come out of the darkness. It wasn't trying to say any of that. It was just showing you the darkness. And that's why it works. Whereas in something like Megalopolis, you can't feel it through because it's literally a fucking literary essay on utopia. And then it just happened. He's like, and we create utopia by, drum roll please, creating it. and you're like, wow, thanks Francis.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. Anyways, what were you about to say?
No, I think you're right. I think the reason Megalopolis does read and feel like a thesis, because it really does. It reads and feels like a straightforward
it's meant to be
thesis.
Yes.
Is, first of all, I don't think it was initially meant to be. I think collectively he had to sit with this grand feeling and idea of Megalopolis, because I do think it probably fit more early on, and through the years it fit into his habit of feeling his way through creativity and ideas and notions. So, but by the time he had to then start processing 25, 30, 40 years of, inspiration and feeling and notion and idea and textures and themes and characters and, the romance of it all, at a certain point, I think he did have to sit down and intellectualize all of this stuff to create a coherent, quote unquote, or at least defined thesis. And that's what this film feels like to me. It feels like a decades worth of inspiration, which is what it is, of sort of collecting these notions and ideas and and creativity and sort of sparks.
It is such a hodgepodge at this point. Yeah.
And then he had to sit with them in order to make something coherent out of them. And I think that's that sort of dissonance for the experience of the film. Particularly with what you're saying, sort of the punctuation of the film being sort of, and this is how we make civilization or utopia. You have to actively do it and make it. Ha 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 ha. Then he ascends
like,
to heaven.
No shit, Sherlock.
Right. And
it's like it won't just happen magically. And I'm like, yeah, we know that.
I also believe he was feeling that mortality actively, and feeling his place in the cultural landscape, because he is the elder statesman, right? He's been a proper guard of cinema and storytelling and narrative and creativity for 50 years. And at 80 some odd years, his
Wow.
wife dying, I think he's probably feeling, well, what exactly do I have to say? What is the final thought I may want to leave with? Not to saying that it was the entirety of the mission behind this piece, but when you factor in this, again, this 40, 50 years of creativity that you then have to sit with and say, all right, we get 2 hours and 30 minutes to make a movie. What's the fucking thesis? This is kind of
here's the thing.
Here's
the thing
that evolved for me.
I don't think that's how it happened. And there's a couple of reasons for that. One, he had this thesis back in the 70s, or so he says. Like, the thesis was there from the get-go. He did not have to come up with it. He already knew he wanted to compare American imperialism with the fall of the Roman Empire. And he was like, this is what we're doing here. This is the point. And by doing that, by this megalopolis, a utopian city that would be something different. So, like, that whole core concept was there from the get-go. I actually think the problem is he never let that core concept go. And the reason I think that is the problem is, one, maybe there was something to 1970s version of American imperialism and the decline that compared to something like what exactly was the fall of the Roman Empire.
Right.
I think, though, you can't feel your way through the differences between the Roman Empire and the American Empire, because they are very distinct in terms of what exactly is going on in this point in time, what the structure of the global, because we're not even in these little, especially compared to 1979 also, though, but we were already becoming very globalized by 1979. We were post-World Wars, which is when that globalization really began. But even compared to 1979, we are so much more globalized now than ever before.
Oh, gosh, yeah.
He does not seem to have taken anything about the internet or social media or smartphones, like all this technological revolution that has changed the landscape. I made this comment when we were drinking wines at Curated. It's not in our recording, so I'll say this now. But at one point I mentioned that, like, kind of his final thesis, like what he says at the very end, is something around the lines of, did I write this line down? No, I did not. So Adam Driver, the final guy, is basically like, we will talk to each other.
Yes.
We will have a conversation. And this is how, by actually talking to each other, we will create utopia. And my very first thought when he said that was, talking to each other is called the internet, man. And that hasn't gone very well. Like, it has in fact become the problem, is we're all incessantly talking to each other at all times. And to the point, and I'm like, I feel like there's so much about modern technology and everything that has happened since the 90s and 00s that he, like, technologically wise, he just has ignored. And he's still in that 1979's thesis. And I'm like, okay, man, there is, we needed to go much further and not just introduce and especially, here's the other big bummer, or the thing that I thought was a missed opportunity. He has a fantastical element called Megalon.
Yeah.
Right? And this is and I love the fact that he's like, he discovered this element. Doesn't say how.
No.
What exactly is the element? No. Someone else made a really good point when they were talking about, how do we get this element?
Right.
How do we mine it?
Where does it come from?
Right. Yeah. What does it cost? What does it do to the environment? What is it? Like, nothing. He's just like, and this element that's going to build the future. And it's like, okay, but what that element costs in terms of time, labor, environmental resources, where does it come? Can we mine it here in the States?
Right.
Like, where this city is being built? How can every city be built from it if it doesn't just exist everywhere? Now, my favorite part is, it was when he dives in at the very end, when he's revealing about his dead wife, like how she died. Mm-hmm. And he said, by trying to rescue her out of this car, which he couldn't, I discovered the principle of Megalon. Yeah. He just says it. Does not explain what that means. It does not show how him trying to rescue her discovered the principle of Megalon. He just says, I discovered the principle of Megalon. Boom, Megalon exists. And is in infinite recyclable, everything resource, renewable,
Right.
seemingly resource, no explanation. It just is, which is that problem with like, he's like, you create utopia by having a utopia. It's like, you can't just fabricate something out of nothing
Hey,
and then say that's the solution.
You will take your narrative inconsistencies and you will enjoy them and you will shut your mouth.
No, they're not inconsistencies. That's the thing. It's not an inconsistency, Dallas. It's a fabrication that has no basis, but it's not even representing anything.
It's true.
It's just a thing.
Yeah.
That if you're trying to say this is how we create utopia by inventing something that doesn't exist and could never exist and could never work like anything that does exist, and only if we have this can we have utopia. What are you saying?
Yeah, the message is a bit simultaneously oversimplified and also so ridiculously convoluted. And I don't know. So here's my question.
Before you do that, right? I
I
almost forgot the thing about Megalon. So at one point too, the pop star comes out wearing a dress made of Megalon. Remember the outfit made of Megalon?
Oh, the whole character. Yeah.
The missed opportunity with Megalon. It is a new technology that someone, some genius, some tech bro, aka Adam Driver, is swearing is going to save everything and be the future. And by modern day by the time he was filming this in the fucking 2022 to 2023, we had AI. We had smartphones, we had the internet, we had all these things that promised us to be the future, that promised us to solve our problems, that promised to be good for even if it had downsides, it would mostly be upsides. And sold to us because you could make money off of it. And so it was sold to us in one way while other things were going on in the background. And in the end, these things wound up being horribly dangerous and had huge downsides that are still being downplayed to this day. And here is Megalon, something that when you wear a dress, it's see-through. Someone can see through you. And I'm like, just like how the online environment, like everything about you can now be seen. Everything about you can be tracked. Your identity can be stolen. I was like, there's so much right there on the cusp of being a true blue comparison that makes sense in the modern day he's filming this. And he does none of that. Megalon is just a miracle technology that will save everything. And I'm like, whoa, I feel like Francis Ford Coppola, look, he is an older guy. He probably didn't do that much with online anything. But the point is, that is the world we live in now. And the fact that he had a miraculous technology that was going to build the city of the future, which is exactly what AI is being sold to us as. I was like, but it will actually destroy us. I'm like, this is so in my head, I do think this is the wrong movie for the wrong time. It was a movie he might have been able to make back in the 80s and it would have had some resonance. But by 2024, he was making the same thesis he had in 1979. Yes, he had accumulated all these bits and pieces and new ideas, but the ideas were just sandwich, like a quadruple decker sandwich. He just kept adding it to the same fucking sandwich. Didn't matter what the kind of sandwich it was supposed to be in the first place. And in the end, it was something that you just couldn't eat anymore.
Oh, it was delicious. Quiet down. It's delicious. No.
Anyways, you were saying.
I don't remember. That's just funny. But I do think I think you're right. This film would have been much more potent had it been done in the 90s. This film in the late 90s probably would have had a much greater impact, with the idea that that thesis is a holdover from the late 70s and early 80s, with the idea that his sort of infrastructure for painting this world is ancient Rome and ancient Greece. With this idea that the near future is going to bring about these advances in technology that cure so many of our sort of social ills. All of those things, I think you're right. 20, 25 years ago, this film would have been very prescient, very potent, very interesting. But at the end of his career, with the weight of everything that he has going, and his own ego, and the machinery of it all, and not to mention, as we were talking about earlier, not having those voices of not necessarily dissent, but counterpoint around you because you are self-funded, just made for this cocktail of a film that, it isn't necessarily delicious, but it is a thing. And it's great to look at. There are some real, real great notions and concepts and ideas and tries and attempts, which never come fully together.
Right.
Right. So yeah,
every scene feels like its own scene.
Yeah,
that was like, because again, you can see the hodgepodge of ideas where it's like, I had this idea somewhere in this 40 years, and this was one that stuck well enough that I stuck. I stayed with it.
I'm keeping it. Yeah,
and I'm like, okay,
yeah,
right. I'm like, cool, but does this really work with the larger scheme of things? And again, I would have appreciated this film so much more if it had just been fucking poetic and abstract, just all feels, nothing but mood, atmosphere, contemplations, like Adam Driver looking onto this dialogueless scenes of just him existing in this megalopolis with his megalon. And none of it had, it would have been very European graphic novel.
That's true, actually.
Of a thing
it would have worked so much better had he used that open-ended approach, that kind of romantic sit in the moment without contextualizing, without even text that sort of walks you through what it's supposed to be. I do. So again, I think somewhere along the line, maybe that was an intent, but when you factor in 40, 50 years of yourself and nothing but yourself with these ideas.
I disagree with that. I disagree that was the intent. You cannot deny that from the get-go, he's always been saying what the intent with this film was since the 70s. And that intent was always the intent we got here. So I cannot buy this absolution where he's like, he meant to be more artistic and then he was cowed into being narrative. And I'm like, no, he wanted it to be his great treatise on how to be a utopia in the modern world, and he could never put his finger on it. He could never get that. He had all these disparate images and visuals, and I do think and he's always been like One from the Heart, the musical, and with Dracula, where he wanted the costumes and the sets to be minimal, the costumes to be big and the sets to be minimalist. He's always been very visual. He's good with that. And I think he brought some of that here, but he also still couldn't put his finger on what is this utopia look like? And that's why the sets, unfortunately, do look very generic. They're not that interesting. They're pretty enough. They're well enough made to look at. It's not an ugly looking film, but it's nothing you haven't seen before. And it
got away from him. It got away from him.
That's
the only way I can sort of paint that picture. It got away from him.
Well, and I think, obviously a lot of people have said Adam Driver, obviously a stand-in for Coppola, right? He is the creator. He is the inventor. And one of the points the movie was trying to explore and trying to state was creation and imagination is what saves humanity. It just could not figure out how
to say it.
Imagination and creation saved humanity.
That's true.
It's just it does. It just go with it. Megalon, I invented that.
See, it's thing, guys. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. But it's you make a movie, you create something. I'm like, creation saves you, right? If you're a creator. That's what creation saves. You need to do it, and you need to fulfill yourself, and you need to get your thoughts and ideas and whatever out there. Does it save others? Not necessarily, maybe a few, but the whole, the culture, creators often have an overinfluence because they live in their own. They live in their not just their own works.
I have the secret.
Not just their own works, but sort of, but more than that, the industry. Hollywood people exist in Hollywood. Hollywood has an overflated sense of how amazing it is. to the rest of the, and how important it is to the rest of the world.
Yeah.
I watched a movie not too long ago called The Congress. It's an animated film. It was partly live action in like the beginning and end, and the middle part is all when they go into the Congress. It's all this animated thing based on a Stanislav Lem novel. So I don't know if you've ever heard of it. It's from 2011, I want to say, something like that. It was a movie that, and this, they did this, the movie did this, the novel had nothing to do with this, but the movie was basically like movies, Hollywood, like is what keeps civilization civilized. It's like without it, we lose our way completely. And I'm like, so like literally nothing else is involved in civilization. And it was such a head up our ass view of what fiction and movies meant to people, where it's like, calm the fuck down. No. One, we already know with humanity that it's only when our basic needs are met that art even enters into it. Right? It's like, that's when humans have the ability to, they have the time and the luxury to explore art. And if we have that time and luxury, absolutely, it's human nature. We always do. It's what we start doing and what we become if we have the enough ease of life to make that happen. But if we don't, we don't. And that the end, like it's a part of culture, of civilized culture, but it is not the keystone. It is not the thing that keeps it together. And I really hated that thesis of that movie. I thought it was really just because, again, gave no credit to a single other thing. Now, like nothing about law or order or justice or, morality or anything or, empathy or like just fiction, creation. And I'm like, oh my God, fuck off. So, but Adam Driver is plainly the creator. But here's the thing. It's like, we don't even see him creating that much or that often. We don't see what he creates. When he creates something, it's just kind of something random that sort of like floats out there and is there. In order for him to create, this was one of the more interesting things. I don't even know if it was intentional. But of course, 9/11 sparked this scene, this story idea of the satellite that falls down and blows up half the city, right? And Coppola wanted to put that in there because of 9/11, but it was weird because, of course, 9/11, we know that 9/11 happened because we did not take action on intelligence that we had, right? And the post-mortem, intelligence post-mortem, we do know that. We're like, oh, we were given warning and we did not take it seriously enough, but we could have, which is the real tragedy of that, right? Now, in the movie, they're like, oh yeah, it's happening. We can't say for sure, and there's nothing we can do about it. And then it just happens. And I'm like, that's not what 9/11 was, my man. It was, one, an attack, and two, it was something we could have done something about, but we didn't. We chose not to. Right. Like we were a little too lazy, a little too self-satisfied, a little too like, this would never, we couldn't believe it could happen, right? And then it happened. And I feel like it needed something to, because again, he was talking about a dying, decaying city, a culture that was on the way out because of its ways and its complacency and its corruption. I'm like, well, then make that about the corruption and complacency. Like, missed opportunity in every single fucking scene. It's like he didn't know his own thesis.
Again, I think the thesis was just as we've decided.
I still won't. It was there from the beginning.
That's what I'm saying. It was clearly there from the beginning. I do just think that reflecting on that mountain of creativity 40 years later, when you're trying to put a stamp on and tell a 2.5 hour long film, it just probably seemed impossible. Honestly, I think he just was his own worst enemy. It seemed impossible because even as we sort of in the moment fix all of the, the glaring issues, it's one of those things that would end up being a nightmare of a production. So I totally understand what you're saying, and I agree with most of it for sure. But it just
I will say,
Go ahead.
I do think there's no way this movie wouldn't have been unwieldy and
right.
right. I don't think there's a way to have just made it a tight little neat ball of perfection, but the themes could have worked. Like the core theme could have translated well enough. Yeah. And it's just, I feel, well, and one thing I do wish that he would have just jettisoned, like this is a movie that after 40 years, he needed to have started. He needed to be like, I know what I've been inspired by over 40 years, right? It's in there. It's in me. So now, especially for someone who says, I don't think things through, I feel things through. Awesome. Jettison the whole thing and feel your way through it now.
Yeah, right.
After 40 years, sit down and write this script now.
You're gonna ask...
And I don't think he ever did that.
No, I don't think so. I think that was an impossibility for the kind of creator he is. It just
doesn't sound like it.
Because he seems like the kind of guy, like you said, once he has an idea, I think it also seems like even with the stories of him firing, the collaborators, mid-production, as far as I can tell, in a lot of that, he has a lot of...
He changes his ideas on a daily basis on set. We heard those quotes. So, I feel like, I don't know. I feel like this guy could have, but he loved... I mean, again, when you call the shots, this is the problem. Like, you can't cut a page. You can't cut a word. You can't get rid of an idea. And that can be the kiss of death for a lot of things, because you personally can't see the forest for the trees. And the more time passes, the worse it gets. That's why you need to just go with, I know what the story is supposed to be. I do. I've been sitting on it for 30 fucking years. Let's start over. Now, look, your other drafts are there. Don't burn them. Don't delete them. Just leave them there and see what happens if you try starting from scratch.
I don't know.
Nothing is harmed in trying it.
So what we essentially have here is a guy who has amassed 40 years of pre-production, right? That's what this is. 40 years of pre-production. And once it goes into production, he gets to fund it and direct it. That's where we went. That's just a recipe for this, honestly. That's a recipe for this. It's a recipe for this.
I suppose. Although I wish, but again, I wish he just had his theme tighter in his head, like, because of how long it's been. And it's been the same theme. And I'm like, motherfucker, you've been thinking about it for 40 years. Like, how do you not have ideas that work with each other after all this time? But a couple last things here that I just wanted to mention. So one of the big things also is that creating utopia. So, the 9/11 event happens. It does destroy half the city. That creates the land and the less people so that they can build the utopia, which is also such a weird thing where it's like, okay, so we only get utopia if half the population is decimated. Interesting. Not sure about that.
I don't think you went out, or maybe you did.
Maybe you did. But okay. Here's something I wanted to run by you, actually, because I'm not sure if I'm so Adam Driver's, at one point there is a attempt to smear his name by showing a video that he's sleeping with an underage girl, the pop star, right? Now, it turns out the pop star is not underage. She just sold herself as underage, but she was actually 23. So that wasn't a problem. But then they say, and the video is doctored. It wasn't real. Or the photos, quote unquote, they say it wasn't real. But then, when we finally hear about Adam Driver's dead wife, right? He has this little monologue that he says to, I forget her name, the main love interest. But he's telling her about his dead wife, and he says, she came home and saw something that inflamed her jealousy, and then hopped in the car and then took off in the car. And I'm like, that's all he ever says about it.
Yeah.
He does not say what she saw that inflamed her jealousy. And I'm like, were you sleeping with someone? And then he runs, because he's so guilt-ridden over this thing too, right? And then, so I almost feel like there was, my take on it, honestly, I think he did sleep with that pop star. I think that maybe that thing was doctored. to try and smear him. But you'll also notice the pop star never really tried to deny it.
Yeah, at all.
And he never really tried to deny it.
Yeah.
And then she came in. I feel like something got lost in the mini drafts or the edits or something. I feel like this was a point, because I think it was to show that he was not a perfect person, that he had made flaws in his life. And this is one of the reasons why it was hard to let his dead wife go, who was pregnant with their child at the time. Coppola is absolutely obsessed with babies and pregnancy and that being so important to everything. But he made that happen. And then, of course, he discovered the principle of Megalon while trying to pull her out of the car and rescue his dead baby in her stomach, blah, blah, blah.
It's so funny you say that.
She says that line and nothing.
I feel like in the cinema, there was a scene there. Oh, shit. Hold on. All right. We're going to have to cut this out. Give me
I thought so, too. I went back and rewatched the movie.
Yeah.
There's nothing. There's nothing.
Shit. I feel like there was a brief scene where there was a ghost of an image as the wife came in that she saw him with.
There's not.
Crazy.
I went back.
Interesting.
There's a ghost of her dead body lying in a bed at that moment. It's like this weird montage thing where you're seeing all these images, and I went painstakingly through it because I thought the same thing. I'm like, oh, she walked in on him with someone. Yeah. And then I kept going back and I'm like, no, it doesn't come out and say that or show that. Shit. But we do know that she walked in and saw something that inflamed her jealousy, and he had not discovered Megalon yet. So he wasn't working on it, or I don't know, making love to it, which you probably would expect from this guy at this point. But that was such a throwaway line that seems to have so much meaning on this character and on why he was obsessed with his dead wife. Yeah. It was really interesting, and like no one else seems to have noticed this line was ever said. I've listened to a lot of other takes on this movie, read a lot of takes on this movie. No one mentions it, and I'm like, that is a profound thing to say out of fucking nowhere and never go back to. But anyway, I wanted to mention that. And what was it about Adam Driver? Oh, the time thing. We got to talk about the time thing real briefly. So the time stopping, which mostly, actually, we don't have to talk about it very much. It's mostly just about because he loses the ability when he loses faith in himself. So it's just having faith in yourself and blah, blah, blah. But there is a thing where he can stop time, and that is like a superpower of creators. Of course, again,
I think that's another reflection of Coppola's view of himself as a storyteller. I think that's just a direct sort of character infusing.
Right. And then in his final speech, he says, tear down debt. Leave your slums they've placed you into. He's talking to just like the common people. And go where? Isn't that essentially what the homeless people in the world are? Is leave your slums they've placed you into. Stop paying for it. And it's like, yeah. And do like, you don't have that option if you don't have a lot of money, man. Like, that's not something that anyone just gets to do. How is this a solution? And then, of course, the craziest thing is, of course, this whole movie is about how do you create a utopia for the people, for the people, for the people, for the people. Yeah. The people are not in this movie. Yeah, so
this is... So we're talking about the Catalanarian conspiracy. This is sort of the direct kind of import from that. Essentially, in 63 BC, there was a Catalin, I think his name, Catalari. But he was a disgraced... elder, wealthy person in town, and he decided to overthrow the ruling party by gathering the proletariat and essentially telling them just that. He became the kind of the Pied Piper, so to speak. So that's kind of the sort of carryover from that. But again, you're right. The proletariat, for lack of a better term, it does not feature in this film at all.
Only people of means and power. Yeah. And it's like, this is how we build utopia. And I'm like, I don't know if that's true. Like, without them, they never talk to the people. Like, ever. Right. And in fact, the only person who does is Shia LaBeouf's character, who's supposed to be a total con job, who like does not give a shit about the people. And that's the only person who would ever talk to the people. Yeah. Is the person who wants to be populist in a false way. Right. And Yeah, again, just so many things here where I'm just like, I did want to play this real quick. Maybe we leave this in the podcast episode. We're already going way over long, but maybe we don't.
Yeah, yeah.
But I did want to play this real quick. This is George Lucas talking about very similar themes. So I'm going to play this little clip because I thought this was so interesting in comparison to Coppola being obsessed with making a movie specifically about this for 40 years. When asked about the power of storytelling from a political standpoint, and this was what Lucas decided to say. Here we go.
There's also the side of you that's a political animal. I mean, you are, among people who know you, a billionaire who's not that crazy about capitalism.
That's true.
Tell me what.
Well, I grew up in the 60s. I grew up in San Francisco. So I've been formed in a certain kind of way about, believing in democracy and believing in America. And I'm a very ardent patriot. Mm-hmm. But I'm also a very ardent believer in democracy, not capitalist democracy. And I do not believe that the rich should be able to buy the government. And that's just the way I feel.
Is that the America you see, where the rich have bought the government?
Well, come on, it's been that way for a long time, and it's just it's not right, and it's not going to work. And
will it change?
Well, I hope it changes. I mean, it's hard because you got human nature. You got people. Basically, we got a country based on greed. And as long as you got that, then it's corrupt. And as long as it's corrupt, you're never going to get a real meeting of the minds on what is best.
So why don't you make a film about the America that you are articulating? I mean, why don't you use the power of George Lucas to tell the...
I don't think I have that much power. I mean, I learned... My first film was kind of an indictment of our...
Could I show you a list of the 100 best films and how many of them are made by George Lucas?
Yeah, but they're not made to... Yes, they have a political undertone. I mean, especially Star Wars has got a very, very elaborate social, emotional, political context that it rests in. But, of course, nobody was aware of that. Nobody says, oh, my gosh. But if you actually watch the movies, it's there, and you subliminally get the fact of what happens to you if you've got a dysfunctional government that's corrupt and doesn't work. But, most of the fault lies with the media. And I know everybody uses the media as a scapegoat.
George.
But the things the media focus on, the sensationalism, the kind of simple answers, the not really telling the truth, is what creates a society where everybody gets really polarized, where they're afraid. The legal system, the financial system, the political system, they're all based on winner take all. But that's not a good society. That's not a good culture. That's a culture that is built out of a caveman mentality, where the guy with the biggest hammer wins. And that's not a good society.
And you want to see a society that is defined how? By everybody comes out?
By compassion, is saying we care about everybody in our society. And what we want to do is what's best for everybody in this society. And we want to build the best society where everybody gets the best possible life they can possibly have.
And would you call this democracy? Would you call this socialism? Would you call this some other ism that we don't have a name for it?
Common sense.
Nice, yes.
Yeah.
No, I get, George, look, it's easy to have that point of view about a capitalistic democracy when you have $1 billion. I'll just say that. Not to say that he didn't
100%.
earn it, or, it wasn't given to him because of his creativity and work. But I will say, when you do compare, where Lucas is in his life and storytelling to where Coppola is in his life and storytelling, it does seem as if Lucas is a hell of a lot more interested in the collaboration at every turn of the process. Now, that just...
But I think that's the thing, is that democracy is a collaboration.
Right,
that's kind of the key. Right. And I think the problem with Coppola tackling a democratic empire, like, how do you say the people? It's going to be democratic. They have to vote for someone. It's still democratic. And it's like, maybe it's just his brain isn't collaborative. And so he's like, you still have to have an Adam Driver. You still have to have a creative genius. It's just going to make it happen again, like, and tell people this is what they want, because how else are we going to do it? And but then at the same time, he's like, we have to have a conversation, and so yeah, I mean, it's still very muddied themes, but it is interesting that Lucas is just like, that's not really the place of just some creator, someone making movies. It's like, that's not what that, like, this is not my thing. I don't know enough about it. I don't have that power. I don't think I have that power. And here's Coppola being like, writing things is what will save everything.
Right.
And
it's like writing things and making movies about those things is what I do. So that'll save everything. This is my part.
Right.
You know.
Right. All right, guys. Well, we're going to wrap this up now, finally, at long last. Let's talk about the wines and which one goes with Godfather, which one goes with Megalopolis, either the 2000 Cabernet Franc or the 1998 Cab Sauv. We're actually going to start with the clip from the production designer, Bradley. Brad is actually kind of lays out what I think we all agree on here. So we're going to listen to this, and then we're going to come back in and weigh in. So let's go ahead and take a listen.
And it is
2000 Cab Franc.
Yeah, 2000 Cab Franc.
From Coppola Niebaum.
21,000 bottles were produced. That's actually quite a number.
That's actually quite a number.
Take the word only off that.
There's like a smoky pouring wine and dipping wine.
Yeah, he's always posting.
I get that like caramelly thing.
You get the. I'm getting the caramel.
Yes.
That sort of.
Yes, like raisiny. Yeah.
Which sort of, I guess, is caramel.
Yeah.
I get like crusty bread at the very beginning.
Ooh, it makes me want.
I'm with you with that.
And then the flavor afterward. I don't get the flavor right away. I
Well,
think
the acidity is still there.
It is.
right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so good.
It's so good.
I would go. Oh yeah, that's cool. I don't think I'd have a second glass.
Really? I think it's getting better with every sip.
I'll come back to it.
I would have a second glass if I was eating a steak.
Okay,
I'd be
fair.
Like,
Fair.
I think it definitely opens up with some fatty protein for sure.
Yeah.
Right. What do you think? What do you think?
Covered in chocolate.
What do you think? Our designer of production designer of Magalopolis.
Megalopolis wine.
I don't know. This feels more like a Godfather wine.
Oh,
There it is.
Tasted the Cask.
There it is. We haven't yet.
What's it? 1998
This is 98?
Cabernet.
But this tastes more like revenge. I like that description.
All right.
Yeah.
actually, yeah.
What's Megalopolis?
Something more
I haven't-
acerbic. Ooh,
It's about
that
him,
is.
actually.
What is it not about? Might be easier. It's a.
It encompasses everything.
Yes.
Hence the name.
He was writing it for over 20 years.
Yes. Ooh, 40 years, wasn't it? Originally? I think it was 40.
Yes,
It was 40, 1982.
Yes.
And he's tried to start filming in 2011.
You're right.
Doing a lot of B-roll footage in New York.
Yep.
9/11 happened.
that's right.
He kept his B-roll filming all the 9/11 recovery,
Mm-hmm.
and then had to shut it down.
Yep. Yep.
I think Leonardo DiCaprio at one point
Yes.
was attached to it as
And Al Pacino as well, I think, at one point, which I was really surprised. I was like, why isn't Al Pacino in this movie?
Yeah, it seems like an Al
Right,
Pacino
right.
role,
Yeah, well, the Dustin Hoffman role, if nothing else. I was like, why Dustin Hoffman? Why not Al Pacino? What the hey? What the hey?
how like her audition for it was literally like an open casting call in Atlanta in like a middle school auditorium where she showed
Yeah.
up. Like, so what do you
Yeah,
do?
yeah,
She
yeah.
was like, I mean, she's an actor, but then she was like, I work in a daycare center, and they're like, okay, cool, thanks.
Yeah,
And, like
it's like
2 weeks later,
cacao.
then she got a
It's
call.
not
Like,
chocolate.
you want to be Adam
Cacao.
Driver? She's
It's
like,
Chocolate doesn't even take the shit.
That's right.
But, so was she actually in that pool?
It's less
floating?
slutty.
Yes.
That whole scene?
They had a trainer, so they brought her back. That was like, they
Oh, I
shot
know.
the whole, yes,
I was told we have to film
yes.
a car underwater.
Yeah.
And we want to film it next week. Where's the pool? How do we get the car in? What does it look like? I want it to look like this movie.
And she had to train for 3 days to
And
do
then she had a quick
yes.
weekend show.
Wow.
Friday, Saturday,
My
Sunday.
friend
It's
Haley,
amazing.
who's Zack Snyder's dead wife in the movie, like shot the movie, and then like months later gets a call and was like, "We need one more shot with you." And had to go through 3 or 4 days of underwater training to shoot just
To
one
shoot
scene
how
where
she
she's
drowned
floating.
and yeah.
She's dead.
Yeah, with the sandbag on her lap, with
Yeah.
the car underwater. And the pool.
Oh.
All the Georgia law enforcement learned how to recover cars and bodies out of water in their training facility.
Wow.
Wow. That's cool. Wow. Yeah.
That is dedication.
Yeah.
But I agree with you. This tastes more like revenge than
2,000-year-old bottle.
Yeah,
25
I see
years
it.
later.
I get it.
And I think there's that
There's no
like that
optimism.
acerbicness.
Not
to
at
it.
all.
There's no
There's
optimism
a
in this
darkness
crowd.
there. There's
Came back and got you.
yeah. There's an anchor of hatred there.
It's got to be. So this is your Godfather wine. Well, we haven't
I don't
tasted
know.
the other one.
Yeah, we haven't tasted that one yet.
Yeah.
It's true.
But again, I'm thoroughly surprised that this is held up and it tastes as nice as it does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it just keeps opening up, which is
Yeah.
nice.
Yeah, tomorrow this is going to be fantastic.
But you know, The Godfather, it has Al Pacino taking over for Marlon Brando. And so this has that, like, I don't want to say Brad, but like that kick to it where, I don't know, that acidity, that acerbicness where it's like, yeah, I'm going to be the new Godfather. I'm going to run this town. I'm going to do this. And of course, it's all tragedy.
Absolutely.
In the future.
It's bloody, it's acidic, it's acerbic, it's all those things. Agreed.
But I think it's all that. And like,
Agreed.
But that could be the Adam Driver character.
We were just talking a little bit about how Coppola's obsessions, how I'm like, I don't feel like they've changed much.
There's a lot of growth in his,
He just
there's
has
a lot
less
of
people
growth.
saying no.
Yes.
What's that? He has less people saying
Yes,
no.
less people saying no, and it's less collaborative simply because
he's financing.
Right, he's financing at this point.
And there it is.
Oh, I hate us so much. I hate us so much.
Why is that?
Just hearing to us pontificate on and on out of context, it's hilarious to hear it.
See, Dallas doesn't edit these podcast episodes. I'm so used to it. I'm so used to
I'm
it.
like, who are these two? Oh my God. Yeah.
I have to listen to us all the time. When I create short videos, when I create everything, it's nothing but listening to fucking
You've listened to my voice more than
So-
I have because I hate listening
Yes.
to myself.
So you heard us think the Cab Franc is probably the Godfather wine. Now, the one thing I will say is, you know, Godfather, it's the wine. I think thematically, I really wanted the Cab Sauv to be the Godfather and Cab Franc to be the Megalopolis for two reasons. One, the Godfather is what got him the Napa winery, which of course, and this was the 70s. So this was the decade that Napa was becoming the huge thing it would become going forward. They had just won the Judgment of Paris, and Cab Sauv had just become the grape of essentially America at that point. It was like the New World, the American, the Californian grape to beat. So I really wanted Cab Franc, and also Cab Franc's more old world. The popularity was huge around that time. Cab Franc was fading in popularity around that point, but is kind of coming back now in popularity. It's very much, Cab Sauv has been overexposed. It actually doesn't grow in as many places that well. It gets a little too jammy and fruity, and now is starting to get kind of like buttery Chardonnay started to get a bad reputation, a bad rap, because we overgrew Chardonnay, because that also became one of the main grapes of California. So I feel like Cab Franc is now starting to become, it's just become the main grape of Livermore Valley here in California. It's starting to get planted more, and just like people fall in love with Cab Franc. Whereas Cab Sauv is like, if you're a wine nerd also, you have to kind of poo-poo Cab Sauv a little bit, 'cause it just got too popular. So I feel like Megalopolis is hitting that era and time period, and it's more of your cinephiles going to be the only people who love Megalopolis in any way, shape, or form.
That's right.
Like, just like your wine nerd is the one that likes Cab Franc. It's a little more challenging than Cab Sauv. So I feel like thematically, I really wanted it to go that way, but I cannot disagree with Brad here, the production designer. Cab Franc, it tastes like revenge. It is what, and not revenge on yourself. It tastes like you're getting like it, you know, best served cold kind of thing. Like Cab Franc, it's got that extra something that is challenging, but it's so much more complex. It's so much better. And in that way, The Godfather, it is ultimately more complex. Its themes and its characterizations come together and are on point. Megalopolis is that sloppy, sweet, dense, chewy, but ultimately usually unsatisfying, assembly where it's like Cab Sauv can be amazing, but it takes a lot to grow Cab Sauv well. You have to grow it in the right place.
Yeah.
Cab Franc has this complexity that you have to ease out of Cab Sauv. Cab Franc is one of the parent grapes, so it's Cab Franc and Sauvignon Blanc, hence the name Cabernet Sauvignon. And Cab Franc has all this complexity. The Cab Sauv, you have to tease it out. And if you don't do it well, it's not there. And that is Megalopolis in a nutshell. It's like it needed to be teased out and it wasn't. And you get this sloppy, over sweet, over dense, over ripe, over dark and brooding and not much else Cab Sauv.
Yeah.
Though that said, this Cab Sauv was quite good.
It was surprisingly good. I think it was the age, honestly, that was the biggest factor. But it was, it was surprisingly complex. Not overly complex, but it was surprisingly complex. And I agree with Brad's assessment. So yeah, we were all basically on the same page when it came to the pairing. So yeah.
Yep. So there you go.
Baby.
Cabernet Sauvignon. Yep, Cabernet Sauvignon, Megalopolis. Go find these days. Yeah, just go find a basic.
Absolutely.
Like some California cab. It'll probably be too sweet and too dense, and not a lot else going on with it. Chances are, especially if you don't pay too much for it. Bingo. Take that one home. And yeah, for Godfather Cab Franc, spend something on that one.
Yeah.
That should be your splurge. $35 or above, you're going to get a really nice Cab Franc. So go with that.
Open up a bit. Absolutely.
All right, guys. Oh, and also, when in that clip with Brad, you heard some voices talk about the actress who had to be weighted down with sandbags in the water for her drowning scene. That's going to give you a hint as to who we're going to be talking to next week.
Right.
So look for that dropping next week. We thanks so much for listening. We are going to exit you on another clip of Brad talking about his time on Megalopolis. That's going to be the exit clip, so don't go anywhere until these next couple minutes are done. But we will be back next week with the Vinterview, and then the week after that with another wine and entertainment pairing for your Vintertainment. Thank you so much for listening to this long ramble. We are almost 3 hours into this recording.
This is a marathon.
Thank you so much, guys.
It's not our longest.
This is a marathon.
Thanks for being here.
My tummy is actually slightly hurting because I keep talking, like projecting into the microphone. I'm talking too loud, and so it's like, and I'm like, it just needs to. I need to like let my gut hang out now for like the rest of the day to like give it a break.
Right.
All right, folks. Thank you so much. We'll check you later. Now listen to this final clip of Brad.
Later, guys.
I heard the story in The Godfather where the wedding scene.
Yeah.
He wanted helicopters
to
come in and shoot all that, and like he had never done helicopters on a film shoot before, so he didn't understand it would whip up all the set and it would just go flying. So like
it's like just go do it, do the thing.
A lot of the footage wasn't usable in the ultimate end because he was just like, I want it from this angle and I want it this way, and then like the whole set was essentially like lifted up into the air, and he's like,
Okay, maybe you're under an NDA, but what was one of your most trying moments on the experience? You don't have to be specific, but
trying moment. That's a good question. The most trying moment was coming in 30 weeks behind everybody, having to hire an entire new team of people to take over for the team that was leaving, while everyone else was running at 200%, and getting caught up, knowing what was happening, what needed to change, all while trying to hire a whole new team of people to pick up at that speed and take it to the finish line. That was probably the most trying.
And trying so hard not to fall into the same mistakes that the first crew.
So did you know what the mistakes were? I mean, did they key you into what the issue was with the previous team?
This town's very small.
That's
the
true.
industry's very small. There's relationships that I had built up with previous on the team that was leaving. I had worked with some of them in the past. There was a bit of a handoff in terms of what was happening, what had happened, and understanding how I could help fix the problem.
Got it. Wow.
And did everything I could to help him get to the finish line, however he wanted, and a lot of that was to save money and figure out the visual effects. He pushed all of the heavy visual effects moments in the movie to the end of the film. But he had laid off his visual effects department 2 months prior, so there was a bit where I had to wear both hats for the last 3 months.
That is Congrats.
It
Seriously?
was a challenge.
Finish line.
Yeah, the whole experience was 6.5 days a week.
I mean,
14 hours a day.
So, what year did you come into the production?
I spoke with him on a Friday, early first week in January, and I was on a plane on that Monday in January of whatever that 23.
Okay.
Okay.
Wow, it was great. It was a wild experience.
I believe it, man.
I mean, it's memorable.
And that's the best part about this industry.
Yeah.
That's true.
They could
Yeah.
not
You get
have
great
been
memories.
The whole group couldn't have been more welcoming.
Wow.
Could have been more appreciative and thankful and collaborative, and jumped right in and really let me, do what I could to help push it through. They knew decisions were made and things had to change. Took it to the end.
Wow.
Yeah, it was great.
Out of, when we had this, if this is or you don't have to answer this, if this is a question that you can't answer, but from what I've
This is opening up.
heard from this production, it was a lot of
Can I pour these two
Please,
Coppola
yeah.
was finding
Kind of become
what this movie was going to
Oh, yeah, yeah,
be,
please,
the process of making it, and like what it was going to look like,
let them know I may
especially from a production designer, it was like,
Yeah.
what does the city look like? What is the aesthetic? What is that? And so it was very much you had to be insanely spry on a day-to-day basis in terms of just like, we might be changing what we just thought of the day before.
It was always changing.
It was always changing.
He could never.
Yeah.
He will be the first to tell you he never has done a sci-fi movie. He's
Right.
never had to conceptualize something that hasn't existed.
Dracula.
Well,
Yes,
no, there's a lot of history.
That's
and
historic
architecture.
fiction. Yeah.
Fantasy horror, sci-fi, not quite.
Yeah.
Utopia.
Utopia.
Right?
Yeah.
No, he's the first one to tell you I am not great at that, and he looked to everybody to do it.
Right.
And there is a trove of amazing concept art that runs the gamut.
I bet.
Of everything from organic to technical, robotic, everything in between.
Yeah.
And it went to all those places, and it ended up where it ended up, which is interestingly closer towards the beginning of the project.
Huh.
That is interesting.
But it's a lot of it is Neri Oxman's a biologist, doctorate, designer person, designer in her own right, who he hired 15 years ago to basically study what Megalopolis could look like.
Yeah.
Is this you?
And that's really it. That's and he heavily leaned on her and her scientific findings and the organic, biological side of it.
That makes sense. I mean, a lot of the movie I noticed was heavily, like, based on historic
Banana?
writings.
Shitting in a banana? It is a
based
chewy
on
one,
historic,
right?
Like philosophers and history, and it was.
wow.
I could almost see
Weirdly.
that sort of
It's weirdly smooth.
his need to define this through history, through things that had been. Because you were saying like he'd never done something that had.
I'm getting serious banana.
And he
I'm
almost
getting
tried to
serious banana.
then in sort of the past, and then how to define the future through that past.
Yeah.
Well,
It was a constant struggle and a constant conversation. What it could be, what it should be.
right. And what was possible, of course, always.
The phrase that he always says and still say is there's a lot of poetic realism. It's not about what it should look like, it's what you want it to. It's everyone should interpret it in their own way.
That's kind of a theme in his work too.
The whole film was a poetic, realistic version of itself.
Saw you stick your tongue out of that. Nod your head a little bit. Yeah. I'm like, yeah, nice try, Frank.
Exactly.